Very good. Thanks, Pamela. So again, welcome everyone. We're so glad you're here. We're so excited to have Andrea here today to talk to us about publicity. A couple really major announcements. The first one is National Sisters in Crime has recommended that we do not meet physically for the remainder of 2020. So Triangle Sisters in Crime agrees with that, and we will continue to meet once a month, second Saturday of each month, virtually until 2021, and then we will assess the situation. So that's decision has been made. Also, we want to certainly say that Sisters in Crime is an organization founded on the principles of equality and inclusion, and we believe Black Lives Matter. The Triangle Sisters in Crime board will meet in July, and we will talk about how we can turn words into action. We want to attract and support Black mystery and crime writers, and we're just going to meet and talk about that and have an initiative that we can roll out in September. And we would love your input on that. So please email me via President Sisters in Crime with your ideas. Please, we want your input. One way, of course, that we can support our sisters and brothers in crime of color is certainly to buy their books. I'm so excited that I just bought Grace Edwards' first book, Grace Edwards, and then just this past Sunday, I couldn't believe it, but I read her obituary in the New York Times. Grace Edwards was 87 years old when she died in February. She published her first book at age 55, and at age 60, she started her detective stories set in Harlem and starring a female cop, Mally Anderson. It's called If I Should Die. So again, I think we should support our Black mystery and crime writers by buying their books, and I'm so excited to read this. Also, she has a Sisters in Crime scholarship in her name, a grant. Sisters in Crime has an annual grant, Writers of Color, Eleanor Taylor Bland crime fiction writers, for $2,000 to support via conferences, seminars, retreats, online courses, and the deadline for that grant has been extended to June 22nd, 2020. So please spread the word about that if you know any writers of color that might not know about it. Spread the word. And we also want to celebrate you guys, so please let us know your good news. And we have with us Diane Kelly today. Diane, I hope you'll be able to turn on your video, and she is one of our members, and she's actually going to be our November speaker. Hey, Diane, we're so
I just had my name there.
we're excited to have you. Diane was published in a mystery journal called Mystery Reader's Journal. I love this journal. If you are not familiar with this journal, it's really great. Each month it comes out quarterly, and each quarter it has a different theme, like PIs or garden mysteries or mysteries that take place in England. I was in this one. This is Mystery Down Under, but Diane, I noticed, was in environmental mysteries, and she is right between me. I had an article in here between me and William Kent Kruger. How about that? So Diane's going to tell us about her article and about her upcoming book, and plus the good news that I saw that you just got, Diane, on Facebook.
Oh,
yeah. After Diane, the meeting will be turned over to Pamela Raymond, our program chair, who will introduce our larger speaker. So Diane, please tell us your good news.
Thanks. So how I heard first about this journal was from my publicist at St. Martin. She emailed me and she said, hey, this journal is looking for mysteries that are related to environmental issues and wildlife issues. And lo and behold, I had just released Paw of the Jungle, which basically deals with both issues, because pretty much any wildlife issue is almost always an environmental issue too. You know, we're dealing with habitat destruction, that kind of thing. So, you know, when we write our books, you know, I'm sure it's probably the same for you guys as it is for me. You know, we write primarily to entertain, you know, both ourselves and our readers. So, you know, I don't like to get too preachy in my books, but when I can, you know, bring in an important issue, especially something that is, you know, near and dear to my heart, like animal welfare, then I like to be able to do that subtly in the book. So it was nice to be able to get to write an article for the Mystery Reader's Journal about the book. And the article was called A Captivating Story. So it mostly dealt with animals in captivity. And that's what Paw of the Jungle, you know, dealt with. So the book was about animals being stolen from a zoo. And when I turned to my synopsis, you know, I had kind of an escalating scale of animals. First, it was a pair of hyacinth macaws that are very valuable, but not real large. Then it was a small monkey. Then it was an antelope. And then it was a black rhino. And when I turned to that synopsis, I honestly had no idea how I was going to have anybody sneak a black rhino out of the zoo. But I thought, well, I've given myself a challenge, you know, I'll figure it out. And luckily I did. I came up with something kind of a different way of doing that. But I actually got the idea of just, you know, because I heard several times throughout the years of animals being stolen from zoos. And I was like, how in the world does somebody steal an animal from a zoo? So I did some research on that. But also, you know, I just personally, you know, I kind of cringe when animals are kept in captivity, because no matter how well the people try to recreate the natural environment, it's just impossible to make it exactly the same. You know, SeaWorld cannot recreate the ocean for the whales. And but at the same time, you know, there's a lot of issues with animals in the wild being killed off, and we would have a lot of extinct species if there were not animals in captivity maintaining those species. So it's kind of this, you know, push and pull within the animal welfare community about these things. And another issue with animals in captivity, and, you know, the whole Joe Exotic thing exemplifies that so well, is that, you know, a lot of these people that call themselves zoos or sanctuaries, it's all about making money, and the welfare of the animals is not important. So, you know, swimming with the dolphins and getting pictures taken with white tigers and things like that, you know, all that sounds real exciting, but unless the dolphins are actually free and they get to decide whether they want to swim, there's, you know, issues with that, and it can be dangerous also, you know. So pretty much anytime we do something that's not fair to animals, we are also endangering ourselves. You know, the situation we're under right now with COVID-19, it all started from a wildlife market, you know. So, and look what's happening. We can't even have regular meetings for the rest of the entire year. I mean, this whole year has been, you know, a disaster because of the way we treat animals. So, you know, I hope I don't sound too much like I'm getting on my soapbox, but this is just kind of my pet cause, you know, for animals. And because it also affects us, you know, there is sort of a, you know, self-interest in this too. You know, factory farming is bad for people. We've had mad cow disease. We've had, you know, swine flus, bird flus, all that kind of stuff, you know, and the environmental aspects of just the waste from factory farming, you know, and how bad that is. But another thing that really kind of got my attention was when I lived in Texas. There was a guy named Jason Shaw who ran a pet store called U.S. Global Exotics, and he got arrested in the biggest animal seizure case in U.S. history. They seized 26,000 animals from him. I mean, yeah, and a lot of them were already dead or dying. He had made, let me find my notes here on this. He had made 3.4 million in 2006 and 4.5 million in just the first 11 months of 2007 before he was closed down. He was facing charges under what's called the Lacey Act, which deals with hunting and with wildlife trade. And one violation of that act can provide up to 5 years in prison and up to a $250,000 fine. So he was facing some really big charges and big penalties. And he fled the country. He was from New Zealand, which Sarah knows all about New Zealand. So he fled, went back there, and he ended up settling. And remember all those millions I said he earned? So he settled for $15,000. He went away. Biggest animal welfare seizure in U.S. history. So that was just a horrible injustice. And I remember at the time just being absolutely disgusted, especially the fact that it happened in my town. You know, it was just really, really sad. But times are changing. You know, I do feel like there is a lot of hope now. People are starting to pay a little more attention. And, you know, this virus is one example of that. You know, how do we treat the animals? And we're really messing things up for ourselves by not doing that. So I do see some change. You know, SeaWorld now is no longer breeding the captive killer whales. Factory farming, there's, you know, a lot of information coming out about that. So there's more public awareness. So I do feel good about that. And I was glad that my article in Mystery Reader's Journal and my book were able to, maybe give some people some information that they wouldn't have had otherwise, and to present it in a way that was not, off-putting.
Right. Tell us about the good news that you just got.
Well, I had a couple of good news things recently. So I sold a new series, which was very exciting. It's a moonshine series. So the first one's going to come out in about a year. So that was interesting and fun. It's always fun to start a new project. And the other thing was that I sold audio rights to, my publisher sold the audio rights to my next 3 books in my Death and Taxes series. So that series has been out for a while. So it's always nice when you can make some money off something where you don't have to do any more work.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and I actually have a reader to thank for that. It was a woman who is blind, and she emailed me and said, I've read the first 3 books on audio and would love to get more of them. And are they going to come out? And so that just prompted me to nudge my editor and say, hey, what's the sales department? Have they talked to anybody about doing this? Because it's an outside company that did it. And that caused her to nudge the sales department, which caused the sales department to nudge that company and get it on. So I'm really learning that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So I had a reader to thank for that, which was nice, so.
All right, Pamela. Thank you, Diane, so much.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I know we want to get to the good stuff, which is Andrea, so I'm going to just do a really quick run through of some announcements. So let me just pull this up real quick. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here and we'll get this going. All righty. Okay, so today's speakers, Andrea, and I know I'm going to butcher this, Killiani Thatcher. She's a publicist with Smith Publicity. And so she's going to be giving you some really good pointers on how to use social media as a writer. So first things I want to let you guys know is that next month there is no meeting, so feel free to hit the pool, hang out with the kids, grandkids, what have you. No meeting will be in July. We will start up again in August. August 8th, we're going to have the national president of Sisters in Crime, Lori Rader Day, as our guest speaker. And then in September, we're going to have September 12th, Zelda Lockhart, who is a registered expressive arts consultant and educator, and she will be our speaker for September. So August and September are already set. Please mark your calendars, and we will have details on our website, trianglesinc.com. And before then, if you like to get some free events in, our national chapter does have events that you do not have to be a member in order to join. So on June 16th, there is a how to launch a book talk, an overview. And then on June 23rd, there is a speaking meeting about what writers need to know about agents and publishing. And that particular meeting will have one of the Triangle Sisters in Crime members, Nikki Terpolowski. She is a literary agent with Holloway Literary, and she was our guest speaker last month. So if you did not see her last month, it was a great discussion, and you probably want to catch this June 23rd meeting just so that you can hear Nikki speak. So those are some free events coming up that you might want to take some time to do. So just want to do a little bit of Zoom etiquette since we're going to be doing this for the I guess the short term through the end of the year. Please make sure your audio is muted. For those of you who work during the week and you probably use WebEx and Zoom and Skype and all that kind of stuff. But for those of you who don't, please mute your audio. Also, if you want to ask a question, please put it into the chat box. Or if you've got your camera up, you can raise your hand. And if Andrea can see you, she will definitely talk to you. But those are the 2 ways that you can go ahead and get your questions answered. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Andrea. So Alrighty. I've got a whole thing here for her. So let me go ahead and make sure I get all of this in. So Andrea is a book publicist at Smith Publicity and a bookseller and social media manager at McIntyre Books. If you guys are familiar with Barrington Village and McIntyre Books, Andrea is also associated with them. Andrea has a long relationship with the independent bookselling community, having been a bookseller for over 10 years and has worn many hats within the industry. She has worked with the New Atlantic Independent Bookseller Association, the Southern Independent Bookstore Association, and the American Bookseller Association on social media education for its member stores. She has spoken on topics such as how bookstores, authors, and publishers can all work together to promote events and increase sales at the annual Book Expo convention. She also has experience as an in-house marketer and an independent book publisher. Prior to joining the publishing world, Andrea was a journalist. So let's give a warm welcome to Andrea Kelly Thatcher.
There we go. Okay, sorry. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. In talking about what I was going to talk about today, I don't have a focus on social media in my initial comments, but I'm happy to take questions on that. That is something that I help authors with all the time, and it's what most of my experience at bookstores is with. So I am happy to talk a little bit about that as well. But first of all, you know, what does a publicist do? The big difference I think people need to understand when they're thinking about hiring a publicist is the difference between publicity and marketing. And one way I explain it is publicity is earned editorial coverage, where you're chosen to write an article, your book is chosen for review, you're included in a roundup, you have some kind of interview on television or radio or podcast, whereas marketing is something you're generally paying for. A marketing budget is something that your publisher may have, and that the marketing is, you know, the posters you see at Book Expo, or if ARCs are being sent out 9 months ahead of release by your publisher to booksellers and bloggers. That's part of marketing, though that particular example overlaps a lot with publicity. So there's a lot of overlap. So I think one thing that's important when you're considering hiring a publicist is making sure what their expertise is and what their scope is, because there's a couple things that a publicist isn't. We're not really, if you're self-publishing or you know, hybrid publishing, we're not really Amazon consultants. Like if there's something wrong with your book listing on Amazon, I may or may not be able to help you with that. We're not really sales strategists as such. Or distribution experts. Sometimes, you know, because of my background in bookselling, I can help out with a lot more distribution questions than some publicists, but other publicists on my team really would have no idea where to start with answering a question about how your book gets to a certain bookstore or whether it's available to that bookstore. And, you know, in terms of sales strategy, of course, we hope everything that we do leads to building your author platform and your author brand and leads to more sales. But we really don't answer to sales figures, so to speak. I think in a publishing house, in-house publicists probably do to a larger degree. But we're not here so that, you know, I think when our business development reps are talking to a potential client, we always like to be clear that you're not going to be able to say, okay, I spent $3,000 on a publicist, I'm going to make at least $3,000 back in sales as a result of the publicity I get from that. We really can't make that kind of promise, like ever in the world, but also especially at a time that's kind of in flux in the publishing industry, which honestly, it describes almost every year, but this year, of course, especially. So that's kind of, you know, if sales is sales, distribution, the mechanics of getting your book out there, if you're an independent publisher, there's certainly consultants and organizations that I would recommend. Girl Friday is a great one that we work with a lot. There's some hybrid publishers we work with that do some of those things, like She Writes Press is one, which probably, I guess I don't know that it's majority women in this group, but everyone I've met is a woman. So there's different groups that I could recommend if someone wants help with those things. But if, you know, it's mainly about sales figures, a number of books you want to sell, an amount of money you want to make, those aren't the primary goals that I'm working towards as a publicist. My primary goals is to raise your visibility as an author. I consider a campaign a success if I have a nice long line of links at the end in a report that says, here are all the media opportunities we've earned you, here's all the reviews that we've earned you. That can include Amazon and Goodreads reviews if that's a focus for you. Some authors are like, I don't care, I don't care about Amazon reviews, which I think is kind of silly, but I only want A-list national media. And that's difficult. If you're, in order to set expectations going in, we like to look at each author's portfolio. What book number are they on? Are they independently published or with a traditional publisher? Does the publisher have a budget behind the book? And a lot of those things are going to influence whether you can get A-list coverage. Like, there's a lot of authors who really only want Good Morning America and NPR and all these places that obviously are great places to be seen at, but at the same time, you know, we had an author, a cookbook author on Good Morning America recently, and that week after the segment, they sold 40 books. So was that more valuable than a review on a well-read, in your case, a mystery blog, where people are really getting information, or a bookstagrammer who has a lot of people swipe up on her posts? You could easily get more book sales out of a well-placed Instagram review with a influencer with the swipe up function than you could off of some national media. And I think even the ability to judge those opportunities is something that sometimes you need a publicist for. Does every author need a publicist? Probably not. I think the author before me mentioned that she has an in-house publicist. And a lot of times, if you are with a traditional publisher, you will have an in-house publicist. Now, I've been an in-house publicist, and I can tell you at my publisher, which was a small independent publisher that had a very large list, which is sort of uncommon, I had 40 books a season. So you can pretty easily figure out how many hours a week I had for each book in that season. It was a lot of getting a press release out, and if something very specific hit me in the face and like, oh, I have an author that's perfect for that, I would submit them. But there were maybe 5 to 10 books per season, maybe 20 books a year that we really put a lot of publicity behind, because, you know, there's 3 people in our whole department and 150, 200 books. So that's not to in any way denigrate what an in-house publicist does. They're excellent at their jobs, even maybe even more because of how many books they have to work with. But what I've liked about moving to the agency model is I get to work on a handful of books and implement the type of creative ideas I've had in the past, and not had time to follow up on, or, you know, think outside the box or whatever. So that's kind of what you're paying for, I think, when you're paying for an independent publicist or a publicist within an agency. But there's also a lot of free resources out there. The talks with the national chapter that Pamela mentioned, those are some of the things that people have us consult on, and you can learn those things on your own. A lot of times I tell people you either have to throw time or money at it. And so if you have the time and you can learn to do those things, you can do the blogger outreach, you can do the influencer outreach, you can do the research that tells you which type of outreach is best for your audience in your book. There are plenty of resources out there that can help you do that. I'm not here to say that everybody has to have a publicist by any means. And I also have a lot of resources that I can offer you guys if you want to reach out to me. We have some Goodreads consultation materials. We have how to work with bookstores materials, you know, how to optimize your Amazon listing. And if you guys, I'll mention more as they came up throughout the hour if I think of them, but you guys can always reach out to me if you're interested in any of those materials. So then I wanted to talk a little bit about the ideal publicity timeline, because sometimes when I'm giving these talks in person, I see the shocked looks on people's faces. When I mention the publicity timeline, I know that you guys are all, obviously, the fact that you're in this group shows that you're very active and professional and, you know, doing your research. So it might not surprise as many of you. But, you know, I mentioned ARCs before, which are advanced review copies, advanced reader copies sometimes they're called galleys. So that's the, basically advanced copies of the book that a publisher, when you're talking about traditional publishers, sends out to booksellers, bloggers, influencers. If you've ever been to Book Expo, they drop like 300. There's a book drop at 2 p.m. at the HarperCollins booth, and you walk by and they just dropped a big pile of 300 books, and everyone's grabbing them. They don't care if they're interested in that genre. They're just, you know, grabbing books in tote bags. So it's basically to blanket the industry in these books if possible. And that really starts 9 months to a year ahead of publication. Now, is that feasible and reasonable for every author? Obviously not. Not every author has their book completed 9 months before publication. Especially if you're self-publishing, the calendar can be really constricted. I do warn some authors pursuing self-publishing or hybrid publishing against trying to constrict that calendar too much. I know that one of the advantages of going with self-publishing is that you don't have to wait the 3 years it takes to find an agent, have the agent go through their edits, then find an editor or find a publisher, and then that publisher has an editor that gives you notes and you have to redo that. It's a very long process that I generally say from starting to query agents to publication can take on average 2 to 3 years. And I know that one of the you know, advantages of self-publishing is you can condense that. But I warn against condensing it too much just because there are still sort of entrenched ways that the industry works where if you're skipping some steps, you may not realize until later that you really missed out by not participating in some of those steps, or the industry isn't built for someone to reach larger areas of success that skip those steps. Is that fair? Probably not. Is it changing? Probably. Just this year, I think, as COVID has become a bigger problem, and when people started working from home, more trade journals like Publishers Weekly, Kirkus, Forward Reviews, Library Journal, they've started accepting digital ARCs, which they did not in the past. And so that helps reduce things a little bit. And I honestly don't think they're ever going to be able to go back to saying we need 2 physical copies in the office 4 months ahead of publication. That's the average deadline for trying to get a review in Publishers Weekly or an unpaid review in Kirkus, Forward, most of the ones I mentioned, is 4 months ahead of publication. So really, if you can't get a book to Publishers Weekly 4 months ahead of publication, you're very unlikely to get a review there. Publishers Weekly also reviews 95% traditionally published books from the top 5 publishers. So I think it's important to be realistic about the fact that if you're not at the top 5 publishers, you're in another category and you kind of have to go about success in another way. So that includes the self-published author, that includes small presses. The publisher that I worked at wasn't the top 5. So there's a whole range of publishers that are not in that top 5. And so all those people that aren't included in that top 5 are sort of already at a disadvantage because the industry is set up for that top 5. Only those top 5 publishers have the type of relationship with Amazon where they can guarantee a specific pre-order period, where they can guarantee an embargo where a bookstore won't put your book on the shelf before your publication date, that can guarantee you know, a specific publication date. It can be very difficult to get Amazon to get it lined up so that your book actually comes out on the date you want it to come out if you're self-publishing, or if you're with a small publisher. Honestly, my small publisher had problems with that all the time. And it was kind of something I was constantly saying, like, we need to have publication dates that mean something. And, you know, some people argue that, no, you really don't. I guess I tend to think they mean something because you want to have a flashpoint for media and stuff like that, media is going to look at Amazon and they're going to look at the date the book was released on Amazon, and that is going to be the release date that means something to them. Even if you gave them a press release that says it comes out June 10th, if Amazon said it came out June 3rd, they might be like, this is too old for us to review or something. So, you know, there are different ways that the industry is set up. So if you can get advanced review copies, and self-published authors have done this as well, at least 4 months in advance, then you do have a chance to participate in that traditional sense of media and the way the industry is sort of set up. And, you know, it's also, I just like to point out, because sometimes authors are comparing themselves to, like, the J.K. Rowlings of the world, which right now is not a good example. I need to pick a new example for who I term a large success. But you also have to understand that the top, you know, 5% of books that a publisher has chosen to be the top of their list for that year is getting 90% of their budget. So you could be with Random House, you could be with Penguin, and you could have like a $2,000 marketing budget. So it's not even, once you get to that, you know, traditional publisher, top 5, it's still not a guarantee. You need to ask them what your marketing budget's going to be. You have to ask if you are getting a publicist devoted to your book. You may just have a publicist for your genre. Those are some things to ask the publisher. But you know, 9 months to 6 months ahead of time is when you really have to start focusing the publicity campaign. You want to have a publicity and marketing campaign planned out by that point, so you know what you're doing each month. I'm going to start Facebook advertising the month before publication. I'm going to send out, I ordered, you know, I have self-published authors who order 20 review copies, and they're going to distribute those among friends who they know might review on Amazon, or bloggers, influencers. When it's someone who's shelling out their own money for the advanced review copies, I do generally say 20 to 25 copies is what I would invest in. And honestly, as a self-published author, I probably wouldn't bother sending to Publishers Weekly and Library Journal, things like that, unless you've looked at their editorial calendar and you know that, you know, Pride's an easy one to call on. If your book has an LGBT focus and you know the book's coming out in June, then you can pretty much guess that every publication is going to have a Pride focus in June. But there's different things, like there might be, Publishers Weekly might have a mystery feature in November. So you might plan your whole publishing schedule around knowing that, and then it could change. I can't act like that stays the same, but those are the types of opportunities that it's a little bit easier for non-top 5 authors to squeak in. I've gotten a lot of authors into roundups like that, mystery spotlight, book expo spotlight on women writers, something like that, rather than a traditional review in Publishers Weekly. And again, you know, there's no one segment of the media that's a magic bullet. I've already said, you know, Good Morning America wasn't some magic bullet for sales. You know, we've had similar experiences with authors being featured in the New York Times and not really seeing a bump. So it's one reason that we do point people towards things like social media, where you really can see exactly how many people clicked on something, exactly how many people bought something. When you're thinking about working with a blogger, either for review or marketing, like something you're paying for, if they have more than 10,000 followers, then they do have that swipe up feature, and they have analytics. So you can ask them, what's the average click-through rate of a book that you feature? And they might tell you, well, about 300 followers usually click on a mystery book. And then you can say, what's the purchase rate? And they can tell you, usually about 100 of those people purchase the book. That's probably, for 300 clicks, it probably wouldn't be 100 people. But those are the types of questions you can ask, and you can get a much more like a sure thing. I mean, it's still not a promise or a guarantee, but you have a lot more information when you're working with social media or online advertising. You know, BookBub, you're probably familiar with. You can literally see on their price chart, okay, I'm a mystery author. If I price my book at 99 cents for a week, obviously you do ebooks. If I price my book at 99 cents for a week, I can see how many people get that newsletter, how many people click on a book, and then the average number of downloads for the mystery category. So if the average number of downloads is 700, you know you're probably going to get at least 300 or 400. And so you can really judge the price of that based on how many downloads you know you're going to get. Now, are those downloads going to be at your normal royalty rate? No, because you priced the book at 99 cents for this promo. But they do count as Amazon as purchases. And so if you got 400, you might go to the head of your genre. You might be an Amazon bestseller in your category, which is typically the goal there. So, you know, again, you have to make decisions based on whether the focus is really on sales figures, which for many people it is, and I understand that completely. You really invested in that. And so if you're making decisions based on that, you need to, you know, probably choose things where you know there's going to be conversion. But some people really are interested in building their brand, getting their name out there, getting some people to download this book for free, because at the end you have a page from your next book that's $7.99, and hopefully people will go buy that. So there's kind of a variety of tactics that you can use there. I've gotten a little off of my outline here. I do that. But when to hire a publicist, I think, you know, we love it the sooner you hire us. Like, I have an author whose book comes out in October, and she's with a small press, and I started working with her before this holiday season, like just to get to know her a little bit, give her an idea of what to expect. And so, you know, it's a smaller publisher. We are getting ARCs, but I feel like I'm set up for success for her because we're already writing the press materials. We're already going to be getting the ARCs out. The book comes out in October. I'm able to, I often don't have the luxury of being ahead of that 4-month deadline for Publishers Weekly, but I'm going to be able to get her book to all the trades. I can tell her which social media network is important for her genre. And, you know, get her on that 6 months ahead of time. So really, you know, I would start talking to publicists like 9 months to a year ahead. You can hire us at any time. I will say I had an author hire us a week before publication, and his book came out the week the Black Lives Matter movement erupted. It's a terrible week to be publishing a book, and it's a terrible week to be publishing a book as a white man. You know, ladies are a little luckier right now. I just read a piece about why is there no hype machine about men's fiction? You know, 70% of book buyers are women, and so that's part of it. But it's hard. You can plan. This person didn't plan that great since he hired us a week before publication. But you know, you can plan a lot, and you really, if this time in our lives has taught us anything, you don't know what's going to happen. I've been prefacing so much of my advice lately with normally, I would say, but normal doesn't apply anymore. But the person whose book came out, or I started working with a week before publication, we weren't even sending out review copies until the book was already live on Amazon, and I'm having trouble getting coverage for him. People do want to cover a book the week it comes out, before it comes out. You're rarely going to hear NPR feature a book after it comes out, unless that person is suddenly newsworthy or that person can suddenly talk on a topic, and that's a different type of pitch to NPR than it is a book pitch. And so, you know, I think talk to someone as soon as possible. It's never too late. I mean, the things that I can help this author with that hired us a little bit later in the game, I can help with Amazon reviews and Goodreads reviews, and those are both very valuable. I do think, you know, it's kind of important for authors to know that I mean, I don't want to say all the time, but it's very rare. Your first week sales are going to represent most of your sales. And that can be surprising. You know, sometimes you think, oh, I need to gain momentum. You need to gain momentum before the book comes out. It's very rare for any period after the first week of sales to be a higher sales number than that first week. And so that's why we're focusing everything on the week prior, the week of. If you have a book that you're doing an event and they're going to be making a bulk order, it's great to have bulk pre-orders, and it's great to have bulk orders in that first week. because that triggers Amazon to bring more books in stock. You know, I keep mentioning Amazon. I have my own soapbox, which is the independent bookstore soapbox. But I know Amazon is a reality, and I can't ignore that as a publicist. So I do mention Amazon a lot because it's the most common across authors. But of course, I have some other advice for people who are working with independent bookstores. But I mean, the sales figure things remains the same. But you know, obviously, algorithms aren't directing what bookstores are putting on shelves and talking about as much, so that can be an advantage to many authors. But even independent bookstores are affected by the Amazon algorithm because it affects the, you know, profile of your book. Like if more people are seeing it on Amazon, it's getting more, you know, views other places. They might see an ad on Facebook and then maybe they'll ask their independent bookstore. You know, independent bookstores have their own bestseller list, but it is almost indistinguishable from the New York Times bestseller list. So I do think it's useful to have that, and I'm glad independent bookstores do that. I love the Indie Next list. I love the little, you know, Indie Next reader that you get at your independent bookstore with the featured books that month, but it is usually the same books that are doing well on Amazon. So, you know, there's things that we can do at different points of the process. And I think if you were interested in placing articles or talking on a topic, if, you know, your main character has breast cancer and that's because your mother or you had breast cancer and that's why you did that, then even if your book came out in May, having a publicity campaign for October for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, well, really you'd want to start in like August, would make some sense. And that might be worth investing in. So it's not always that after publication, it's not worth publicity. But I mean, there's a lot of independent bookstores who don't want to have events 3 months after publication. There's a lot of media that doesn't want to review the book after publication. So really, you do want to be talking to a publicist as early as you can. I'd say 6 months is a sweet spot, because then we could start at 4 months ahead and do a little bit of an ARC campaign or something like that. 2 exercises that I often, and let me know if you want to start questions at any time. I don't know how long I've been talking, but 2 exercises I think it's useful.
Andrea, I do have a
ahead.
question.
Yeah.
Because you touched on social media and influencers. And I don't want to assume that people know what influencers are or what their role is, but I know that just as a person who, you know, I have a marketing background, so I've always, you know, kept up with the newest technology and especially with social media. Influencers are something that probably didn't really exist like 5 years ago, but now they do, and now they're pretty powerful. I mean, you know, I just wanted to maybe if you could speak a little bit on, you know, how you've seen that rise of influencers and how influencers can be beneficial from a social media standpoint and where they're located, because you've got TikTok, you've got Instagram, Facebook. I don't really hear influencers used in conjunction with that, but it's usually mostly TikTok or Instagram.
Yeah. Ooh, sorry. I think you need to figure out for your genre, and you know, there's a lot of subgenres of mystery, where your readers are. If you're trying to reach middle grade readers and you know your ideal readership is 12 to 18, maybe you do want to be on TikTok. I don't think you have to be on TikTok because almost all influencer networks or social media networks, they are very tuned into inauthenticity. So if you're trying to use TikTok as a 40-year-old woman like me, I mean, no one's going to think this is your scene. You could do the dances and maybe get some followers. Are those followers then going to follow you over to somewhere where they could learn about and buy your book? Probably not. If a TikTok influencer dances around with your book, are they likely to transition to sales unless it's their market? And even so, I don't think so. The largest network where we see influencers converting to purchase is Instagram right now. And again, that may not be true for your subgenre of mystery. You know, if you're writing for an older audience, cozy mysteries, some subgenres of mystery, I do think Facebook is still influential Again, I don't think influencers specifically are on there, but if you were running Facebook ads, I think that does well with a, older crowd, or, if you've done the research on your audience, then you're going to know where they're at. Are there about 50 Facebook groups for cozy mystery readers? Maybe. I know there's at least like 5. So if you know that there's a bunch of Facebook groups, then that might be worth investing in. If you know that if it's a novel for 20 somethings, 30 somethings, Instagram is usually a safer bet. Instagram has the most analytics where you can ask people for those specific numbers. Like I was mentioning before, you can find out if it's worth spending money on them. But an influencer is really someone who can convert clicks to purchases. And if they are an influencer worth investing in, they're probably going to have a deck they can show you that shows how many people purchase from their stories. They may, sometimes they'll have you pay per click. There are a lot of marketing campaigns that are pay per click. So you pay for the number of people who either clicked on or purchased your book, or there's some that are just a lump sum. So I think working with influencers is very much, you need to know your audience well enough to know what influencers they listen to. And hey, it's not, bad etiquette or anything to reach out to your audience on Instagram or Twitter and say, what influencer are you guys following lately? Have you ever purchased a book based on something you saw on Instagram? I mean, I think I would say a lot of people have. I mean, I have. So, you may find out a lot of information by just asking your readership, asking your audience. If you don't have a big audience to ask online, you can ask an influencer directly, like, what genres do your audience buy the most? What genres get the most click-throughs, stuff like that. So that's kind of how you can navigate that.
Okay, I do have a question from our audience. Do you work with all genres, or are you genre specific?
I mean, I work primarily with fiction. Our agency as a whole has a lot of business clients. And so I'd say our agency as a whole is known a little bit more for business nonfiction books, but I personally work almost exclusively with fiction, some memoir. I do have a lot of mystery clients. I have a lot of, not a lot of YA, but the genres I cover, YA, mystery, general contemporary fiction, historical mystery, they all interlock. So most, I think, publicists are going to have a wheelhouse. I think it's most important that they've worked on a book like yours, and you can ask them, what books like mine have you worked on? And it's most important that, obviously you guys are fiction, so you want someone who works with fiction. Any other questions you want me to get to?
Looks like Sarah has a question for you.
So I'll just come out and be bold. How much do you cost? What would be the range of expense that an author could expect?
I mean, most agencies are going to work with you on your budget. The typical example I give, a full fiction campaign is typically 3 months. That may involve 3 weeks arc, like 6 months ahead, and then we break up that 3 months over 6 months. But a full 3-month campaign is about $3,500 per month. Mm-hmm. And that's where it starts. There are consultations and a la carte sort of options where you can put together something with a smaller budget than that. But for the whole thing, that's typically where we start.
I'm sorry, did you say per month or?
$3,500 per month.
Per month, mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, so, and that also doesn't include shipping and book send costs. Mm-hmm. So there's an additional, and I think if, a lot of different things in the book world have taught us anything over the past few months or years, we should be talking about specific numbers. I don't know if you've been following the Publishing Paid Me hashtag recently. Mm-hmm. Authors are revealing what their advances were so that authors of color or other authors know what to ask for, or know what, other authors in their genre are getting. And I think being transparent about fees, advances, marketing costs, all that stuff can only be good,
Yes.
across the industry.
Yeah, Andrea, I do have an actual specific question about fees, and this is from Eric. Thank you for sharing this question, Eric. He asked, if an author has only, say, $2,500 for publicity, would it be better if they waited until they had multiple books released, or go ahead and spend that on the first book?
If you know if you're really like, a lot of people think there's going to be more books, and maybe they don't. If you know you're definitely going to be publishing 3 books, or you have a timeline, you have a publishing deal, whatever it is, I think maybe you might wait until your second or third book, just because you'd have something else you'd be able to be promoting both at once, for one thing. A side note to that can be, if you're doing a promotion for a second book, you want to be providing people with at least the option to get a review copy of the first book as well, because it is hard to promote a second book if you're not giving copies of the first book out, because people may not have read the first book, and a lot of bloggers will say, well, I'm not going to jump into a story of the second book. So that's something to factor into your costs. So, I mean, you could wait until a second book so that you sort of have your platform a little bit built. I don't think you want to put all your eggs in the first book basket. And I'm sorry I acted like it was all women, Eric. Any other questions? Do you want me to?
Yes, I have another question. This is from Tim. For a book already out several months, any use in Facebook ads, influencer outreach, etc.?
I think there is, because those are things that are more effective at Amazon and Goodreads reviews, and those are things that are longer have a longer shelf life than media interest. So one thing to keep in mind with Facebook advertising is Facebook rewards you for spending more money. So some people think it might make sense, I'm going to try it out for $100 this month, and then if it goes well, I'll spend $200, but then I'll just do $50 a month up to release date. You want to be spending the most money the week of release, because as soon as you start spending less money, Facebook is going to stop showing your ads to people. Their system is built to get you addicted on spending money, so that when you stop, you're like, I didn't get any new followers this week. I guess the Facebook advertising really works. I mean, and it does, but only so long as you're increasing the amount you spend. So you want your spending to build leading up to release. Or if you're starting after release, basically you don't want to go from spending a lot to spending a little, because that is not going to be the best use of your money. You always want to go from spending a little to spending a lot. So if you have a $500 budget, start with $100 a month, then go to $200 a month. And I guess I'm doing math wrong. But, you just want to be building up the amount you're spending, or else Facebook is going to penalize you and try and get you back.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions before Andrea continues? If you do, go ahead and put them into the chat and we will get them answered. You can continue, Andrea.
Okay, great. So one of the exercises that I like authors to do is identifying your target audience. And sort of within our publicist world, we sort of hate when people say, well, my book is for everyone. If you say your book is for everyone, your book is for no one. I'm sorry, that sounds bad, but that's what we're saying about you behind your back. So, but your target audience is a target. And so I encourage people to think of like a bullseye. If you know that your target audience is 25-year-old women who are professionals and maybe put their love life on the back burner and live in urban areas and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's how specific you want to get. They shop at Anthropologie and Target. Like, you want to get very granular. What are they buying? Where are they shopping? What influencers are they listening to? What TV shows do they watch? What books are they reading? It doesn't have to be specifically about just the books. You really want to get to know their lives. It's almost like a character study. And so if you know that that's your target, by shooting for that target very specifically, you're still going to hit the outside ring. So you're going to hit their little sister, you're going to hit their mom, but your target, you're going for the bullseye of the target. And so the more specific and the more information you can gather about that target audience, and again, that also goes back to genre. You want to be as specific as possible about your genre, because the smaller and more niche category you're in on Amazon, the easier it is to become an Amazon bestseller. It's much easier to be a big fish in a small pond. So that's one exercise I really advise authors to do, because once you have that target audience identified, it's so much easier to answer so many other questions. Like, what social media network should I be on? Well, where's my target audience on? Should I be worried about bookstore events and libraries? Well, does your target audience go to library events and bookstore events, or are they only buying on Amazon? You know, is your target audience engaged with social causes? I think the days where you try and remain neutral are quickly slipping away. I mean, especially right now. Like, I'm a comic book buyer, and I recently notified the comic book store that I go to, I'm sorry, I'm going to start shopping in another store because you haven't issued a statement on Black Lives Matter, and I want to know that my dollars are going to people who support that cause. And so shoppers are thinking about that a lot more, and silence is a statement. And so that's another thing a publicist can do, is help you create a statement. There are ways to be, I hate to say, less controversial. There are ways to support the movement without being, you know, at the rally with an angry sign. I mean, I think that's a perfectly valid form of expression as well. But there's different ways you can do it with your comfort level. But, you know, you're starting to have to, you know what your target audience, you know, wants from you, and what you want to give back to them. If you're maybe part of what you're doing is trying to educate people, and so you can, you know, push them a little bit. And, you know, those are decisions that every author has to make for themselves. But knowing what your target audience is responding to in the media is part of that research that you need to be doing. And then the other.
I have two more questions. Do you want me to do those first, or did you want to finish your? Okay. So just first of all, good point that you're making about messaging. Most people call publicists once they're in a crisis. This way, you're helping people to, you know, address messaging in a thoughtful, practical way. So that's
I am not a crisis publicist.
I was going to say that's a whole different skill set. So the first question I have is from Tim Garvin, and he wants to know, how does influencer outreach work, and how many influencers are there in the mystery genre? Is there anything you can give, like, more specific on influencer outreach? And I think I think maybe it might be helpful for people to understand, what does that mean, outreach? Like, how do you get the attention of an influencer? Like, and again, it's probably research, but is there some kind of something you can tell people, like, there's a search you can do in Instagram? I don't know. I mean,
yeah, I mean, the research is the first step. And so if you identified, and honestly, if you Google mystery, what social network do mystery readers use most, you might find something. If you do a variety of Google searches on social media, like mystery readers on Instagram, mystery readers on Facebook or Goodreads or whatever, you'll probably find some advice. I always, when I'm doing those types of searches, I set my search parameters to only information from the past year, because honestly, beyond that, it's like the dark ages. It might be completely, like, TikTok wasn't a thing. Like, no way would the people in this room be talking about TikTok like a year ago. I just downloaded it in quarantine. So I think, and then once you've established which network you're interested in, or maybe it's bloggers, maybe it's not even a social media network, maybe it's Goodreads reviewers, which are a little bit harder to target as a form of outreach. But then there are ways then to search within that, like, go to, and this speaks a little bit to the other activity I'm going to mention, but go to authors that have a similar audience to yours, see what hashtags they're using, see what influencers they're retweeting or sharing reviews from. Go to that influencer, see how many followers they have, see what types of books they review, see how many clicks and likes they have. You can see how many likes someone has. Instagram is actually considering moving away from that model to discourage bullying. But for now, you can see how many likes someone has. You can obviously see how many followers they have. I don't think that'll ever change. If they have more than 10,000 followers on Instagram, then they are in a little bit of a higher tier just because they do have that swipe up feature. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, there's Instagram made it a little, there's now Instagram shopping, you may have noticed, but Instagram is a little bit harder to get people to click to buy on things. Like you can't put a link in a caption. You can only put a link in your bio. So that's another step someone has to take. If someone has to go from your post to your bio to click on a link, that's a barrier to purchase. Every click and mouse movement someone has to make is a barrier to purchase, and we're trying to reduce those. But now Instagram in stories, if you watch the Instagram stories, which are the more like live coverage people are doing, it's at the top of your Instagram feed, you'll see little circles with orange and pink, and you can click on them and see me going, hey, I'll be on Triangle Sisters today. So Instagram stories, people with more than 10,000 followers can literally swipe up on the screen to go directly to a link to what that person is talking about. And that's the way I've mostly seen books. I don't see a lot of Instagram shopping that are books specific, because it would have to be Random House or somebody doing that. That's a corporate thing that Instagram is doing now. Individuals can't do that, but unless you own a business. But so the swipe up feature is something that's obviously very relevant if you're trying to get Instagram influencers interested in your book, and the 10,000 follower mark is how you can identify that. And those are the people who are going to have more analytics to give you and say, well, I can say that a mystery book last month got me 600 swipe throughs and 300 purchases or whatever. So you'll be able to get more information. But hashtags on Twitter and Instagram, honestly, for now, I don't think Snapchat and TikTok are engineered for book marketing. I think you can become a personality who gets a book deal on those things. You can become a personality that people are then going to follow to other places, but that would be a full-time job. Like becoming a YouTube influencer, becoming a TikTok influencer, sure, there's probably a few teenage kids who it happened to them accidentally in their basement, but for the most part, even those kids, it's an accident, they're spending 6 hours a day on that platform. So is that an accident? Like, so you really have to, if you want to become an influencer where people are going to follow you to the point where they're going to go off the platform you're on to purchase somewhere else, that's probably a full-time job. So that's why I think you want to identify other influencers who have already done that full-time job, and you can pay or influence, or, offer them a review copy in return for, some publication on their feed. I think there are a lot of bookstagrammers who aren't going to charge you, who are going to say, I want a review copy, and they are worthwhile. And once you get to, 100K or more followers, probably less than that, maybe like 50K, people are going to start charging you, but you can get those free in return for a copy of the book, influencers. And they are effective. So if if you pay for one $100,000 influencer, 100,000 follower, I don't think it would be $100,000. If you pay for one 100,000 follower influencer, that's one campaign that'll reach however many people. Whereas you could still do that, it would be more work. You'd have to work with 10K influencers to try and get that same reach. The amount of people that your message is being disseminated to is your reach. So I hope that answers that question a little bit. If there's more specifics, you can get back to me.
All right, so we have one more question, and I do want to be cognizant of, we are at about 2:36. So this question here is from Diane Kelly, our speaker from earlier. Do you ever use cross promotions among similar authors to further publicity? If so, what type of cross promotions?
I mean, one thing we like to do is, you know, a lot of times someplace like Book Riot or Bookish or a lot of these literary online sites, of course, you know that listicles are huge, which is the articles that are really just lists like 10 mystery writers who love dogs and went to the park this week. So we'll often be like, here's, like, I have 3 literary fiction authors right now. And so I'm sending out a pitch for 3 upcoming literary fiction authors you need to know about or whatever. And so pitching people within genres is often more effective because maybe you'll get the attention of that editor who covers that genre. And, you know, the one downside is they're probably going to choose 1 or 2 books from your list, not all 3. But hopefully there'll be a good dispersion among the books. And if there's not, then maybe the cream is rising to the top. I don't know. I can't control that. So we'll do something like that. We'll pitch, you know, several books at a time. Of course, every author is getting their own personalized pitching as well. We only use that strategy when we know it's an editor that works with that strategy. But that, I mean, cross promotion often involves like, I'm going to post this on Facebook and cross promote it to Instagram or something like that. Whereas that's not, I mean, that is something that I do run social media for authors on occasion. That's another service that we offer. I actually haven't done that in a little while. So I probably haven't done anything like that in at least 6 months. But so cross promotion typically refers to something like that where, you know, I have something coming out on Instagram and I'm going to cross promote it over here on Facebook or something like that. Or, you know, it can also apply to, you know, I'm a cozy mystery author, but I don't know another subgenre of mystery. But like I have a tea drinking mystery over here and we're very similar. So we're going to review each other's books and, you know, I'm going to post her book. She's going to post my book. I'm going to review her book. She's going to review my book. Stuff like that can work as well.
Okay, great. Well, we don't have any other questions in the queue. So I'm going to ask Andrea, I know you've got a lot of really good information to share, but do you think you could maybe wrap up in about 2 or 3 minutes? And then we'll do a close, and then that way we can not hold people hostage here for the afternoon. They can go off and do something else. Thanks, Andrea.
I'm a little bit of a rambler, sorry about that, but hopefully it's been good information. The other thing I was just going to mention is figuring out what your comp titles are is pretty important because that also helps inform a lot of the other decisions that you're making. And comp titles, that just comes from comparative titles. And when in the old days, when someone from the publisher came to the bookstore and said, here's this new author I have, the bookstore buyer would say, what are their comp titles? And so that tells them what are other books in the genre and what does success look like in this genre? What type of marketing works in this genre? Where should I shelve this book? How many should I order? A lot of information is gleaned from your comp titles. So I usually suggest identifying 5 authors or books that have published in the last 2 years that have a similar audience to yours. And you don't want them all to be New York Times bestsellers because, I mean, I think I can pretty confidently say 99% of New York Times bestsellers have at least $20,000 of advertising behind them. And that may not be something you can compete with. And so maybe you want to have 1 New York Times bestseller for context, but you want others to be, you know, realistic success in your genre. Maybe some self-published, some traditionally published, some small presses, some traditional presses. And so once you have those 5 things, you can answer so many other questions like, what social network should I be on? Look at those comp titles. Are those authors all on Instagram? That's probably where you want to be. You can say, what do their websites look like? What kind of content do they offer on their websites? Do they have librarian materials on their websites? Where do they advertise? Do they do Facebook advertising? You can answer a lot of questions down the road by identifying those comp titles early on. And that's really the last thing I was trying to get to with my.
Okay. Well, that was good. That's a good way to end things. So I did have one quick question here. It looks like has come into the queue from Tim Tim Garvin, and that is, what is the fee for an initial consultation?
I mean, an initial consultation really would be something you do with our BD team, and that's free. Consulting on whether publicity makes sense for you, whether your book makes sense for publicity, that's free. I'm also kind of off the record. I am offering free 1-hour consultations to writers of color right now to try and increase visibility because they less often have access to things like publicity, and that's a problem across the board. So let anybody know about that.
That's
All right,
great.
thank you, Andrea. So that is Andrea Kelly Thatcher. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us today in the industry. It's been very helpful. I know I've learned quite a few things. If you registered for this event, which all of you should have if you're here, you will get Andrea's information as well as information on our upcoming sessions and the national presentations that you can attend as well. And then I think, Andrea, you mentioned that you had some materials that maybe that we could share with people.
Yeah, if you want to reach out to me and let me know, hey, I'm really interested in XYZ, like I have an Instagram tutorial, I have a Facebook tutorial, things like that.
Yes,
sample marketing plan, you can reach out.
Okay, so what I'll do, Andrea, is get that list of those sample materials. That way people will know, hey, this is what she has, and they can, but you'll have the contact information for Andrea. So,
and I'm Shiny Andrea on all social media networks.
I'm sorry, what's that, Andrea?
I'm Shiny Andrea on all social media networks.
Oh, okay. Shiny Andrea.
Shiny Andrea, good to know. All right, everybody. Well, I want to thank Kathy Walsh, who is a member of our tech team on the back end, helping to make things run smoothly. And as always, to Sarah Johnson, our just fearless leader. Don't forget, August 8th will be our next meeting, and we will have the national president of Triangle Sisters in Crime, Lori Rader Day, with us. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the afternoon. This will be posted on our Triangle site as soon as we can get it on there. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Good night. Good night. Good afternoon.